So welcome this evening to our MU for All meeting. Renos, standing there in the doorway, needs no introduction, of course, and in fact it seems quite wrong to welcome him this evening, since he really belongs here. Our friendship goes back a long way. I'm not going to embarrass the children sitting in the front here, but when Hannah, Grace and Theo were at St Matthew's School, I taught them. So our friendship does go back a long way. And then Renos and I found ourselves on a module at the GDMC course, and we ended up car sharing together Monday evenings for 3 years, and had lots of interesting discussions about the surprises that God has in store for us when we're least expecting it. So as I said, this is an MU meeting, and we always begin by saying the MU prayer. I love to use this book. It's called, I'm not quite sure what it is called actually, I'm going to open the cover. Down the front. It's quite hard. It's called Families Worldwide, and it goes round the world week by week, inviting us to pray for different countries. And this week we're praying for Rwanda and the work that they do for the elderly members of their membership. And so I'm a great supporter of MU, and it's a great delight to be here this evening. So using the MU prayer, let us pray. Loving Lord, we thank you for your love so freely given to us all. We pray for families around the world. Bless the work of the Mothers' Union as we seek to share your love through the encouragement, strengthening and support of marriage and family life. Empowered by your Spirit, may we be united in prayer and worship, and in love and service reach out as your hands across the world. In Jesus' name, Amen. I'm now going to hand over to Kate.
Thank you, Beth. I hate these things. There we go. Can you hear me? Yes? Anyway, a big welcome to you all. It's lovely to see so many coming. Certainly Reynolds wasn't expecting this huge number, and it is a real testimony to the impact that Reynolds has made on our life here at St Martin's. It's a buzzy church now. It is a very busy and buzzy church, and I think we ought to know a little bit more about the person who is helping us to make it so, and actually what makes him tick. So we want to know the dodgy bits, Reynolds, the other bits. So would you like to come, and a big welcome to Reynolds.
Thank you very much. Can you all hear me? Yes. Good.
Right, we're going to do this as a sort of a very informal question and answer, so that we get it all in the right order. But I wonder first, Reynolds, if you could just give us a bit of light relief to ask, is there something amusing that's happened to you either recently or just a nice story to start with?
Okay, a nice story to start with. Last week I took an assembly at Glenesk. I'm sure you all know Glenesk School. The class teacher began the assembly by welcoming me to the children. And the children there are aged, it's infant, what age is it? Up to seven. And she said to the children, does anybody know who Reverend Pittarides is? And a few of the children put their hands up, and she said, who is he? He's the person at the church. And to the other little girl said, it's Mr. Bean. To which I replied, you're not the first one. I think 30 years ago I was called Mr. Bean. So, that was lovely.
Now, in some of your, one or two of your sermons, we have...
No, you need to get much closer.
Sorry, in one or two of your sermons, we have heard snippets of life before St Martin's, and some of it does seem to say that you had very humble beginnings when you were a child. So do you think you could just tell us a little bit about that?
Yes. So my parents were from Cyprus, Greek Cypriot, and in 1960, when they came over here, Cyprus was British, so that they had British passports. And my grandparents split up, and divorced, which was not that common, Cyprus in 1960. And my grandmother came over here, and my father wanted to follow. So he persuaded my mother that they would move with 4 children to the UK, and he told her, and I think in fairness to him, I think he believed it, that they would be in a temporary flat for a little while, but actually it turned out to be many years. And I've had a lot of fun looking for photographs and asking members of the family for photographs of this evening, and I'm going to give you, so this is Islington. You're all familiar with Islington in North London, and these photographs probably taken in the 1960s. Oops. Could you just turn, if you turn, that's it. I mean, they're very old and not great pictures, but that's me down there in what was the living room and my parents' bedroom. So this flat had 2 rooms, and so I said that my parents came with 4 children, then had another 2. I was number 5, and the younger sister. Oh, I don't know what keeps doing that. It might be easier if I just control it from here for a minute. So there were 6 children in one room. That was my bunk bed, the untidy bed, surrounded by Arsenal memorabilia. And so 2 of us had bunk beds, 2 sisters were in one bed, and then 2 single beds, all in one room. Now, bearing in mind that I was 11 when we left that place, and my elder sister was 21. There was no bathroom, a grotty kitchen, as you can see, where I remember as a child being bathed in that sink. Fairy liquid cost 4p. And that was the another end of that was my sister's bed, actually, my older sister's bed, surrounded by they're all Greek pop stars. That I came across just before I moved here, actually. The London City Mission, which still exists now, would go out and knock on people's doors and ask if they could talk about Jesus. And I find that personally very moving, because that's me with my younger sister and my mother, and it's titled "God's Holy Book is Man's Best Guide."
What was positive? I mean, that's sorry. I'm so sorry. Those pictures. Was it a very happy home? Yes, it was very humble, obviously, but was it a very happy home?
I think it was mixed.
Did you speak English, or?
Oh yes, I spoke English and Greek. I was bilingual. In fact, I was bilingual properly bilingual up until my father died 10 years ago, and then got out of the habit of speaking Greek, and now it's a struggle. So it was mixed. I can't remember it, but Das, my oldest brother, who I know some of you have met, can remember being hungry, not actually having to skip meals because there was no money for food. But I don't remember that myself. I remember playing football in the street.
But did you feel segregated from?
No, I didn't feel segregated because in that part of London in the 1960s there was quite an influx of Greeks, and a little bit further north in Haringey there was a huge, which I know that you're familiar with, there was a huge Greek community. Islington had a number, and the road that we lived on had about 4 Greek families. But it was a very close community, irrespective of where you came from. The flats that I mentioned at the beginning, there were 3 other West Indian families who lived in the house, and they would all help look after us and all that kind of thing. So it was very, it was lovely.
And of course, there wasn't the media as there is today. You forget how segregated you could be. I taught in a school in Haringey, and it was mainly made up of Greek and Turkish Cypriot children, and the Greeks sat on one side of the classroom and the Turkish children sat on the other side, because they were at that time it was a very difficult time, and there was a lot, and the playground, they had different playgrounds, and so it was a time when you could feel very segregated and almost tribal in your own particular part. It was, I think it was Tottenham, it wasn't Arsenal.
Well, there's lots of tribal rivalry between Tottenham and Arsenal, Andrew. Andrew's waving at the back.
But I just wondered, because it was, because most of the children didn't have television, there wasn't English spoken at home, and it was only at school. I just wondered if you probably didn't even realise it.
I certainly wasn't aware of feeling it, and then in the 1970s when Turkey invaded Cyprus, I do remember at secondary school there being some tension in the playgrounds, but nothing serious.
Now, you went to a Christian Science
Sunday
school, didn't you? So let's talk about that.
Let me try this again and hope that it just gives us... So this is me with my brother Das, which a photograph he found recently. A kind of typical 1960s, and these are just some. I went to a Church of England primary school called St Clement's School, which sadly has been knocked down in recent years. And in those days, which is actually quite forward-thinking, this was a school photograph, which is a little bit more interesting than the kind of classic individual. And that's my brother John, again, who some of you have met, my sister Maria and me on the end. The school was a good 15-minute walk, involved crossing 2 zebra crossings, and I used to walk my younger sister to school when she started. So when I was 6, we used to walk to school because my parents had to work. That's how you feed a family of, a family of 8.
You're all very photogenic.
I think I look in shock. I'll come to your question in a second. So, because we were so poor, we only ever had one, what I'd call a family holiday, but my parents couldn't afford to take all the children on holiday, so they split it over 3 years, taking 2 at a time. And so that's me and Anna, my sister, and parents in Cyprus, obviously loving the donkey. And that's the only holiday that I can remember with, well, it was the only holiday with parents.
So going back to Christian Science Sunday School.
Yes, so I'll tell you about 2 wonderful people called Lucy and Victor Brightmore shortly, but let me say now, Lucy was a Christian Scientist without children, she and her husband. He was actually quite at the time, a well-known French horn player, and she was a teacher, and they befriended, particularly my mother, and would come and pick us up on a Sunday morning and take us to church, to a Christian Science church in Curzon Street in Mayfair, and then take us home for lunch, which was lovely. And she taught me to play the recorder, so she was the first sort of musical influence on my life, and I'll say a bit more about her later, but she was very special. And my parents, who were Greek Orthodox, by the way, and I was baptised Greek Orthodox, I couldn't find the photo of me being baptised. There is somewhere a photograph of me stark naked as a baby, being held up by this priest with a long beard, about to dunk me in the water, because that's how baptisms are in the Orthodox tradition.
Right.
But I couldn't find that photograph. Maybe one day.
So are we going to go on to? This is the 3rd time I asked you, Renos.
It's a wine. Ask me.
They had that large family.
Yeah.
They still do.
Yeah.
Get to the top of the list.
No, they came over, as I say, with British passports and so on, and there was that rather ghastly flat, and they thought they were going to be there for a few weeks. Well, it turned out to be like 14 years. Hello.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really, really sad. Okay, so what was that primary school like?
The primary school was wonderful in many ways. It was very strict. I mean, some of you will remember how strict schools were. Miss Merritt hit me on the back of my legs with a ruler for talking in class. It was that strict. But she was lovely, but she... no, she was, because actually she then took me, you know when we used to have these school trips, a day out, so the teacher would go and do a recce, and she took me and a couple of other friends along for the ride. So, but that was as some of you know, that's how it was.
Yeah, 45 in a class, no health and safety. Forget that.
Mr. Pitelin, the head teacher, used to have a cane up his sleeve, and if you were being naughty, all he had to do was just release the cane so you could see it. That was it.
In my first school, I'm sorry, I mustn't do this, but in my first school, the head teacher came out on the first day of September term, with his hands behind his back. He did it every September, and the poor little ones in the front looking up at him in awe and wonder, and he brought out his pencil and he crashed it down on the table and said, and that's what happens to naughty children. And you know, it was awful, absolutely awful, but that's what happened in those days, and I'm sure you can all remember.
Yeah. But there was also a lot of love too, because the same head teacher used to have a threepenny piece, and if it was your birthday, he'd go along the dinner line and put a threepenny piece in your hand, which was lovely. Yeah.
It was. Yeah, there was a lot of good things. Right, so there's primary, and what was your favourite? I mean, did you have a favourite subject that went through into secondary?
No, not really. Not from primary. I did in secondary. So I went to Highbury Grove School, which when I arrived, the head teacher was Rhodes Boyson. Do you remember Rose Person, who then became an education minister? And he was also very scary and very strict. And he insisted that the teachers wore gowns. This is in just a comprehensive school, and if he walked into the classroom, we all had to stand up, and all that kind of thing. But it was a great school, and the subject I got into at school was drama. I loved acting, and I found a few photographs to illustrate that. That's me playing Oliver, aged 11, and that's Mr. Bumble, with that sort of sackcloth that somebody had put up. Costume. And this photograph really upset my mother, because we went, because remember the scene where he's sold to the undertaker. Remember, Oliver sold to the undertaker, and at one point Oliver goes a bit mad, and they bundle him into a coffin, put the lid on, and then Mr. Bumble arrives and said, "You've given him too much meat." Do you remember the story? So we went to a local funeral directors, and they lent us a real coffin. So not many people have been photographed in a coffin before they're dead, and at aged 11. So. Now this was Aladdin, and that's me on the far right. And this chap here played Princess Balrubador, and his name is Chris Batson, and we're still in touch. We had a reunion this year. But I remember on one occasion going home, and my brother really, really upset, because we put this show on for the whole school, and Princess Balrubador gives Aladdin a kiss, and the drama teacher, who was a wonderful man called Tom Sanders, taught us how to do a stage kiss. And really, it's not a kiss, you're basically doing that. Those of you can see, you put your hand, just at that moment, you slip your hand in, the other person does the same. But from a distance, it looks like a proper kiss. And of course, he got a lot of stick, because his brother, it was all boys' school, his brother was kissing another boy in his play. And he was very upset. And the other thing, so I did lots of drama at school and after school. And then on Wednesday evenings, I remember it being Wednesday, there was something called the Highbury Ensemble, and we used to put on Gilbert and Sullivan shows. And my brother found this photograph. So this is the Mikado. And that's my brother Das on the right, and that's me there with makeup on.
Did you all have good singing voices?
Yes, because my father was a singer, and my father sang in Cyprus. He sang in clubs and so on, and he was a real character, my dad, and any opportunity to sing, he would sing. And Joe will remember lots of family occasions where there was no stopping him. And of course, as he got older, the voice wasn't as good. But yeah, I think that's where I get the showman from. Yeah. So and then lots of them. We did Joseph and quite a few Gilbert and Sullivans. I loved it.
And they're quite difficult to sing, aren't they? The GNS ones, they're not as easy as one might think.
No, in fact, there I was as a sort of in the chorus for the Mikado, and then when I was in the sixth form, I actually played the Mikado. Yeah.
Hey-ho, and then after sixth form, having got all your exams, I'm sure, did you enjoy work?
I think I may have told you all the story. I've told some people the story before in a sermon, I think, about the teacher that told me to leave school.
No.
No, so there was an English teacher.
You left that one out.
Did I? It will come up in a sermon, I've used it somewhere. There was a teacher who I flunked CSEs. Do you remember CSEs? For those of you who who are young enough not to know CSEs, CSEs were kind of under O-levels or GCSEs. And I did CSEs, and I flunked them, apart from one. And he said, you're really interested, strange enough, you're really interested in photography, I think you should go and work in a lab. And I went home and I told my father this, and he said, no, you mustn't do that, you've got to carry on. And I did, and then I went on. In fact, I stayed on an extra year in sixth form to do O-levels, which was a little bit awkward and embarrassing, you know, as a young person. Your peers are doing A-levels, and you're only sort of a year behind. But I did that, and
you went to college? I did go to college,
and
which
was Digby Stewart College in Roehampton. So Tom Sanders was my drama teacher, and he was my role model, and I wanted to do what he did. So I actually set about becoming a drama teacher. And so I went to Digby Stewart College, which is in Roehampton, not too far away, which is a Roman Catholic college, and I did drama and history, and that's where I met Jo. I'm sure we'll come on to that. And had a great time.
And did you get really involved in student life?
I did. Right from the word go, I got involved in the student union and some student politics. And then, in fact, after my 3-year degree, I stayed on. I was elected president of the student union, which was a sabbatical kind of paid post, and represented students in various university committees and so on, and it was great.
Anything dodgy? I mean, you know, after all, it's college. It happens. To some.
Okay, so, yeah, there was some... Joe's saying the Vickers and Tarts party. So freshers, and this again, you know, this is just ironic. So the freshers week, we had a Vickers and Tarts party. And so I dressed up as a vicar, and I was told that the following day, a parent who was visiting their student at university had rung the principal, lovely, wonderful woman called Dorothy Bell, to complain that she'd seen a priest kissing a girl on the lawn. And she's telling me this because in my capacity as being on the student union, and I'm trying to keep a straight face because actually it was me. So, yeah, there were lots of...
I was going to say, if you had obviously a very responsible post in the student union, I'm sorry, I really hate this thing.
Keep it close to you.
Yeah, I know, I'm sorry. Just keep yelling at me and I'll do it. You had a lovely and responsible job with the student union. Now, you can't tell me that politics didn't come into that quite a lot, and if so, did you sort of blot your copybook in any way? I'm being very negative here.
I nearly did, with some people. Funny enough, not with the principal. Sex and the Catholic Girl was the headline in the Daily Mail one Saturday. And that came about because in the Students' Union, you know, you have literature for absolutely everything. And there were some leaflets in there for contraception. Now, bearing in mind this was a Roman Catholic college, some of the parents didn't like that. And there was a journalist who's still around actually called Joanna Bogle, who was very unhappy that the Student Union was promoting sex before marriage. She rang the Sister Bell, the principal, and Sister Bell said, no, they're not doing that, they're just being responsible, and we have to understand that we're not just a Catholic college, we have students from all over the place, and it's within their building, and she thought it was not unreasonable. But this journalist actually then the following day put out this article called Sex and the Catholic Bell. And Dorothy, who was absolutely still alive actually, is in her well into her 90s, called me one day and said, look, do you think just to keep the peace you'd be willing to pull the leaflets just for a while? And so we did.
You did.
We did.
Well done. And at college, did you have opportunities in the music making department?
I did.
Because presumably with the drama.
Oh, sorry, hang on.
Oh,
Oh, this whilst we're here, this is Lucy and Victor that I told you about earlier, with this most enormous cat. I don't know if you can see it.
yeah.
Yeah, absolutely wonderful. My parents couldn't afford shoes, to buy us shoes, and Lucy insisted that we should all have proper shoes. So she marched us all off to buy Clark's shoes. They had to be proper. She was wonderful. So this is what I did a lot of at college. That's me on the right. I was in a group called, it was simply called Sean and Renos. We were a kind of Simon and Garfunkel. So we did lots of that.
Yeah. Yes, because if you're enjoying yourselves anyway. And then I saw a photo just then.
You did?
And
you saw
met,
this?
Yes, you met Joe there.
I did, I met Joe there. So, do you want to know how we met?
Yeah, go on.
We met in a lift. Well, actually, it was just outside a lift, on the way to the college laundrette. And she was there with her roommate, Kate, who then went on to become our bridesmaid and is still Joe's greatest friend, and should be moving around here soon. Lives on the Isle of Wight, but wants to live nearer us and her family. And I was asking him if one of them would do my washing. Joe wouldn't have
Absolutely brazen.
No, Joe wouldn't have it. Kate wanted to know how much I was willing to pay, and that's how we met. And this is actually a very early photograph. I think this might have been. This is actually in West End in Esher.
Okay. And when did you get married? I mean, how long? How many years later?
Not long.
Not long.
A few months.
Few months.
We got. I proposed to Jo on Christmas Day before her 21st birthday, and then I did the right thing and went and spoke to her father, who was absolutely lovely, and then I think this is our engagement. We announced our engagement at Jo's 21st, which was lovely. And then I sang a song. There's always a song somewhere. That's Sean, my friend Sean in the background. And I remember doing a duet. I sang it was a surprise for Jo, I sang All I Ask of You from Phantom of the Opera with her good friend, who was another Jo.
Oh.
Who didn't know that we were going to announce our engagement, just said, let's just do a duet together.
Yeah. And so wedding, where? Have you got some photos?
I have. So this is just another couple of pictures, always with a guitar in hand. We bought this house. This is Cobham. This is Hogs Hill Lane.
Why? Now, what were you doing? Why Cobham?
Because my mother always said that she always remembered me saying that I didn't want to live in London, that she said you always wanted to live in the country. And I think that's because Lucy and Victor moved to a village called Troston near Bury St Edmunds, and I went and stayed with them a few times and just loved the surroundings and so on. And when we came to get married, Jo's parents lived in Esher. Jo knew Esher and Cobham and these parts, and I just loved it.
And you'd left college by that time? Or were you doing the sabbatical?
No, we'd left college.
You left college, so
yeah.
what job did you go for?
straight away I was working for the Institution of Electrical Engineers as a committee administrator.
That sounds fascinating.
Actually, it was. I'll tell you why it's fascinating, because I used to service something called the Management and Design Division, and we used to organise seminars and conferences on topics for electrical engineers. You didn't need to know anything about electrical engineering to do that, but they used to talk about something called HDTV, and that this was going to come in the future.
Yeah.
And there you go. And in fact, it was during the privatisation of electricity as well. And there was a chap who was the chairman of one of the big electricity companies called Jeffries. And he used to send his chauffeur to pick me up to go to the electricity board or whatever it was called. And so, you know, it was my first job, and I was paid. I was earning £7,000 a year, which was not a lot.
That was a lot.
It wasn't.
That was a lot.
For graduates at that time.
Which year was that?
80.
It was getting no, wasn't it?
7.
No, I was thinking
87.
No, I was thinking 70s. It's the other generation.
Yeah, but it was a great start to my career. And then I did a stint for a charity, and then from there, see if there's a. Then Joe and I got married in Esher.
In Esher.
Joe's parents lived in Esher, just off the Portsmouth Road, and this is Christchurch. You know, the church on the green.
Yes. Yes.
And
look at those beautiful flowers, Joe. That's really gorgeous.
yeah,
Don't you look gorgeous? I love
we
the
look very
fashions.
young.
Yeah. Super. Right. Now then, on we go then.
Well, okay. So then, from the charity, I went to work for Richard Gate. Actually, it was called in those days. It was called the Grove Health Centre.
You look incredibly smart. And
He's overweight, isn't he?
And Mr. Blair. So
But
tell us a story behind that.
Okay. So I took a job. I worked briefly for the stock exchange as a committee administrator and hated it. And it was very strange, really, because there were a couple of people on the road where we lived, and who I'm still in touch with now. And they were deeply religious, deeply Christian, and they wanted to pray for me because I was very miserable. I felt I'd gone to the wrong place, very unhappy. And you know, it's very strange because I'd been there 3 months. I was made redundant. I was given 3 months' pay, and then found this job. And I would sort of think, that is bizarre. People don't get 3 months' pay if you've only been in a job for 3 months. But they had this bizarre formula based on age and salary, and rather than length of service. So I'm very grateful to Anne and Steve Clifford for their prayers. And then I was introduced to a doctor, sadly died some years ago, a chap called Bill Stiles, and then I became a practice manager. And in those days it was unheard of to have a graduate as a practice manager. And so I very quickly became a bit of an expert, and then other practices wanted my advice, and I used to go do some consultancy work. I then was offered a post at the University of Westminster as a lecturer in practice management, which I did for 6 years, part-time, and worked at the practice. And then one day we just got a phone call from the MP for Hammersmith and Fulham, where the practice was, saying that Tony Blair was flying into the airport in Norfolk. You know, there's a kind of army, a military airport, and then going to his kids' school for some presentation, which was in Notting Hill in West.
Islington.
Was it Islington?
Islington.
Right. And on the way they wanted to film a party political broadcast, and could we accommodate him? And it would be a private visit, it wouldn't be public, but you would be able to present your staff to him, and so on. So that's how he came to be there, and it was charming. In fact, Grace and Hannah, Theo wasn't born, have got signed booklets to Grace, best wishes, Tony Blair. He was actually quite charming. I always remember a member of staff, he changed his shirt while he was there, and his sidekick was walking around with this shirt, and they said, well, what's the shirt? It's Mr. Blair's. And she said, can I have it? they didn't give it to her.
So life at the practice, have you got any stories about that?
I was there for 25 years,
so
which is a very, very long time, isn't it? In fact, funny enough, what day is it today? Tuesday. Yesterday I went back there to meet one of the doctors for lunch. The senior partner now, who has been senior partner for many years, lovely man called Ivan. We had lunch together. Sadly, this chap, he was the senior partner at the time, Ian, he died some years ago. And I had for a long time, had a great time with working with doctors who are very difficult people. Any doctors in the house? No, they're not all difficult. But my role was really being the manager. I was not only managing the staff and the budgets and all the rest of it. Great experience for running a parish, by the way, but also just keeping the doctors on board and helping them with their tantrums and all that.
No funny stories?
I can't think of it.
No, never mind. Well, let's go right back again, because you were very close to your parents. Can you tell me a bit more about that? Tell us a bit more about them.
So there's Mum and Dad. On our wedding day. My father was hysterical. He thought that whenever a camera appeared, you had to stop what you were doing to smile. So I remember, if you look at our wedding video, every time the camera comes near him, he just stops and goes. He was interesting. I mean, in fairness, he was a complicated character. He suffered from depression. And again, we're talking 60s and 70s. There wasn't the same input and support as there is now, which is very sad, really. And actually, as some of you will know, trying to persuade somebody that they have depression is not easy to get them to understand there's a problem and there's treatment. But there was lots and lots of good about him too. And that's my mother, who was very short.
And you were going to mention your mother's grave.
Yes. So this is kind of more recent. She died 15 years ago. And this is her with her 3 sons. And she was an amazing woman, because she brought up 6 children in really difficult circumstances, and with her husband who was not easy because of his depression and so on. And she just invested all of herself in her kids.
She's got a lovely body face.
Oh, you'd have loved her. Just very sad that they both died at age 75. And I've warned Joe, in my 75th year, you better take me away. Which I think is quite young, really, isn't it? Yeah. But there is a story which I must share with you, and I'm going to show you a rather odd picture. So this was literally the day after her funeral, which I spoke at, actually. And this is all thinking about ordination and so on, but I insisted that I wanted to do the eulogy. And something people talk about miraculous things and so on, and I have to be honest, there's only one that I can think of, and this happened a few months after this picture was taken. It was Mum. Actually, no, it wasn't. It was a few weeks because Mum died in May, and June was my birthday, and I went to the practice, and I was very upset. And Karen, my lovely deputy, said, you know, Renos, why don't you go home? You know, don't feel you need to be here. And so I drove. I actually didn't go home. I drove to the cemetery, and when I got there, the place was deserted. Massive Greek Orthodox cemetery. I mean, you know, that looks bare, but actually that way was just loads and loads of graves. And I was tending to the grave, and I wanted some water, and I'd met this man, and I said, can you tell me where I can get some water? And he showed me where the hose, you know, the tap was. And then I came back here to the grave, and he followed me, and he started asking me questions about my mother, how old was she, all those sorts of things. And then without any prompt, he looked at me and said, it's your birthday, and you've come to give thanks to your mum, haven't you? And just walked away. And there was nothing there, I promise you. There was nothing, I didn't drop any hints or anything. And ever since, all I've thought of is that resurrection story where the angel comes out to Mary and says, why are you looking for the living amongst the dead? And I always thought, wow. And I actually felt really comforted, because I was actually very upset that day, but I just felt this. And people have said to me, did you not go back and quiz him and so on? I said, no, it just didn't feel
the thing to do.
No.
So. And so to become ordained is such a monumental decision to make. How did all that occur?
Well, when I look back, I kind of think there must have been hints along the way, and I think my mother dying was certainly a big moment, you know, thinking about what do you want to do in life, and so on. And when Robert Jenkins, who many of you have met, he was the rector of Cobham. I was a parish representative when we interviewed him. The parish representatives are often the church wardens, but don't have to be. And Joe and I were attending St Andrews with the children, and they wanted somebody with a young family to be on the interview panel. And I remember sitting, Dominic Coombe, who is the patron of Cobham, sitting in his big posh living room, thinking, I want to do what that man's about to do. But I didn't do anything about it for a long time, and then eventually I went and had a chat with Robert, and I said, Robert, I think I'd like to do some pastoral work. I wanted to be a pastoral assistant, and he said, well, I've been thinking about this for some time, and I think you should consider ordination. And that started the journey. Yeah, and it was a long journey, because it takes. You have to go through lots of hurdles, but rightly so. So I had various meetings with folk at the diocese, and eventually, after many months, they said, we think we're going to suggest to the bishop that you should be sent to a selection panel, and you go on a 3-day selection conference, interviewed by, I think it's 5 people over a weekend, and observed. So you have to, for example, chair a meeting under observation, and then at the end of that they recommend to the bishop whether you should go forward for training. And it was a scary moment, I think Joe would agree, when we got the call from the diocese saying they've recommended you for training. We weren't over the moon, to be honest. It was one of those things. I'd started this journey, and there was a part of me that thought, put it back in the box.
You've got a good job.
got a good job, and you know, Jo never dreamed that she was going to marry a priest. So, anyway, so then I was ordained, and some of you will remember Peter Vickers on the right, and that's Robert in the middle. They threw a party at Cobham. That's Robert's wife in the pink, and that's next to Peter's Jenny Vickers, who again some of you may have met.
Yes.
Big Mothers Union,
yes, yes.
Running the branch in Cobham.
And did you? That was at your.
This was no. So this was now a year later, my priesting. So this is me having just taken my first presiding at the first communion.
So which parish were you assigned to?
In Cobham.
What, when you were curate?
Yes, because I did something called Ordained Local Ministry. The idea is that you come from the congregation, you're put through all the training, and then you go back to your congregation.
Oh, that's different.
That is different. That is different.
Not incestuous.
No.
No.
Hardly.
Well, I just wondered, you know, because I would have thought it might be also good to go elsewhere and see.
Yeah, I did. Apart from a 3-month spell in Busbridge, some of you met Jolie and Tricky, who came to preach a few weeks ago. But apart from that, no. The idea is that you're from the community and you go back to the community, and your license is restricted to that community.
Oh, right.
They relaxed it later on, particularly when there were vacancies around the deanery, and you know, I came here and certainly took one service, maybe another, but in the old days that would have been forbidden. So this was at my priesting, my first service.
So there you are. You're a priest at St Andrews. Experiences. What did you? What were you looking? Were you full time?
No, I was working.
I was working.
I gave up the university job, which took a day a week, and I gave that to the church. I carried on doing that. There was always a guitar in the hand. But then, because I was in the parish a day a week, Robert, bless him, structured the whole week around me being available. So any meetings that took place, they were always on a Wednesday. And you know, I was able to take funerals, Wednesday funerals mostly, and also I had flexibility at the practice. But you know, we had a very good time. Just a couple of things to share with you. Those of you who were at 8 o'clock on Sunday would have heard me speaking about Kosovo. We took a group of young people to this most dreadful Roma camp for Roma community. You'll see in the pictures, I mean, real poverty. This is my daughter Hannah here, and that's Will Dutton. Do you remember Will Dutton, the violinist? Yeah. And that's a girl called Abby, and another friend of Hannah's, whose name escapes me.
So did you go anywhere else? Were there any other trips?
Yes, so we also went to the Holy Land, but so this is still look at those little kids, just giving them sweets.
Look at their faces.
Hannah with this little girl who just would not let go of her, and she's not here, so I can embarrass her. But we played with these kids, and we got back onto a minibus to leave, and it was actually very, very grim, and Hannah was very upset. The idea of leaving them behind, but it actually encouraged Hannah. Then Hannah went for years doing voluntary work each summer. She went to Ghana, Thailand, holidaying, but always doing a couple of weeks of holiday work. And all of these clothes that they're wearing were all donated. The Roma community in Kosovo are outcasts. They literally live in camps around the towns, not inside. and they're, I mean, it's very interesting. They are a persecuted ethnic group, but it was wonderful to be able to go there. I actually took. They asked me to take a communion service. I was priested by then, and they said, could you do a communion service, which I did with both Christians and Muslims, which was very strange, but they joined in. But there was a funny story associated with that, because I didn't have any bread or wine, because I hadn't gone prepared to do that. So we went to a shop and bought a bottle of red and a loaf of bread. And when it came to the communion, I was so used to us having screw tops. It didn't occur to me there was a cork in the bottle. So we just had the bread. But it was lovely how actually there were 3 Muslim men there, and I was very surprised, but it was rather lovely that when I went round with the bread, they too put their hands out. It was a wonderful thing. You mentioned other trips, so this is the Holy Land. Who's been to the Holy Land? Not enough of you. It is really, really a wonderful thing. And I think I was saying to Kate earlier, one day we must organise a pilgrimage from St Martin's. This is Robert Cobham and Diana Thornton, who was the priest in charge in Stoke Davenham at St Mary's, and myself, and we led this 10-day pilgrimage. And I've got a little bit of, tiny bit of video just to give you a feel of just how beautiful it is. Let's hope this works. This is by the Galilee. So most places we visited, we had a service of some kind. Not always communion, but this was just very, very special. And that music in the background was just playing off of my iPad. I think this was the Queen's, one of the Queen's birthdays.
Well, you look as if you're having a good time. I think the wine's getting there.
It's Pimm's. I particularly like this picture. Do you know the Tenors Unlimited?
Yeah.
There's one of the singers is Paul Martin, and this is his mother-in-law, who I'm still in touch with. She lives in America, actually. A wonderful, special person. And that's Paul there on the right, with holding the candle. A bit younger than I was baptising the baby during a communion service. And this is a picture that I love. These two ladies, sadly, have died. Connie made it to 99. She's a lady you just about see in the image. and again, guitar in hand, Palm Sunday. And always been very fortunate, of course, to have Joe following me with a camera.
Is it the same guitar? Do you always play the same guitar?
That is the same guitar, actually. I've had others, but I've had this one for a few years. Yeah.
So tell us, is that it? Photos of St Andrews?
Yes.
Yeah. So tell us about your lovely family. What are they all doing now?
So,
Two of them are here, by the way.
two of them are here
Yeah.
this evening, and that was
Yeah,
a surprise. I didn't know they were
Yeah.
coming. I thought they'd be too embarrassed to see themselves on the big screen. But this is me with my brothers, two of my nephews, and Theo in the middle there. And, oops. This is a particular...
That's lovely.
This was in a place called Ordained in Turkey. And
Is that a cousin on the left? Was that? Is that Hannah?
that's Hannah, Grace, me, Joe, and Theo.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah,
I can't
Theo was little. And what's happened? No, we won't go to the beginning. Bear with me.
You look such a happy family.
This was New York last year.
It was when you were here, wasn't it?
Yes, that was the year when most of them were Joe, Grace, Hannah and Theo were celebrating special birthdays, and we saved up for years to say that in that year we would go to New York, which was wonderful. So Hannah in the middle is in Australia. She's been there since the end of January and is back at the end of November, so that will be 10 months. So we're very excited about that. Grace, who's with us this evening, has recently finished at Italia Conti Performing Arts School, is currently working in a nursery, spending time working out what she wants to do, but lovely job in a lovely nursery in Cobham. She's in the baby room, and she just picks up their bugs at the moment, as you do. And Theo's...
You do get immunised.
You do in time. Theo's in his second year of A-levels, and we're just looking at universities for next year. And I'm not going to embarrass them anymore by saying how lovely,
what
they
about
are.
Joe's parents? No, we've come to know Joe's. Oh,
You
there's
have. So this is Joe and I's 25th wedding anniversary, with not all the family, but with a large number of them, including her 3 lovely nephews at the front here. And that's all the Greek side. Again, not all, but most.
Just think of Christmas presents.
Yes. And actually, in the yellow shirt there is my dad. So this must have been just before he died. Joe's parents. Yeah, you've all met Joe's parents, haven't you? Many of you. They're absolutely lovely. They're like real parents to me, and always have been since I can remember the first occasion I met them. I was very nervous because they lived in this big house in a place called Isha that I'd never heard of. And I remember Joe was driving a Mini at the time, and we had to pull up. Actually, Joe's parents lived next door to Keith's brother, Colin and Janet. And we had to pull up at a bus stop for me to get the confidence to say, okay, let's go. We're going in. But they were very welcoming and have been ever since, and they've been great supports to us as a family, and to me in my ministry. And as you know, Bill will come and speak and do things for us here, as he did actually in Cobham also. We're very blessed. Wonderful.
Well, we're hoping he'll come again next
He's
year.
going to come and speak to the Friends, isn't he?
Yes. I'm told Keith that.
In February, he's got a show, so rather than talk about an individual film, he's going to talk about a number of the films that he's made. He's got little clips to show.
So there we are. Now, a full-time priest, Renos. When did you decide?
2013, I started to think it would be good if I got myself in a position where one day I could apply for a full-time job. Because I mentioned earlier that I was in what they call Ordained local ministry, my license was restricted. And in order to go into full-time ministry, I had to go back through Church of England processes. So I went and saw Bishop Ian at the time. Remember Bishop Ian? He was a Bishop of Dorking. And he was very supportive. And they put me through another little mini selection process. And then on Christmas Eve, 2013, I got a letter from the bishop saying, they've said basically you're free to apply for jobs. I thought they might want me to do more training, more experience and so on. And at the time I honestly thought I was going to park it and say, well, one day in the future I now know I don't need to do more training. But of course once that was out the box I couldn't put it back in. And then I started looking around, thinking, could I make it happen?
So why did you apply here? There were lots, I know at that time, many parishes looking for incumbents. So why did you apply to St Martin's?
Well, there were a number of reasons. One, it had to be, for it to work, it had to be fairly local because of Joe's work and where the children were at. I think were the three still at school? Hannah was just finishing. So from a practical point of view, it had to be not too disruptive for them. But then I came and took a service during the interregnum. And
was it Easter?
Yes.
It wasn't Easter Day, but it might have been the Sunday after Easter, actually.
I know you told us that it was the Greek Easter.
That's right, you're right. It was the Sunday after. The Sunday after our Easter happened in that year to be Greek Easter. That's very well remembered, Sheila. Yeah, and I kind of thought, actually, maybe this could work. And then I became sort of more and more interested.
And you had some of the coffee afterwards.
I had the coffee, and I met a few of you. And actually, before I even decided I was going to apply, I've told this story before. I came on a Wednesday, and I took a Wednesday service. And at the end of the service, Barbara Stewart, the lovely Barbara Stewart, I could hear her telling somebody that he's the man for the job. And I was pretending I couldn't. I was being shown the mausoleum, I think. And I just took it as a sign of affirmation, really, that it was the right thing to do. And so Joe and I talked about it endlessly, and I applied, and then I was shortlisted, and then came, the trial by sandwiches. Nice sandwiches.
Not good.
They're very good sandwiches.
They were.
Yeah. And I remember Joe and I going home on that evening and sitting with the three kids and saying, if Dad gets the job, he's got to give a reply straight away, because that's how it works in the church. What do you think? Because it suddenly started feeling real. And Hannah was a little bit upset, not that I might get the job, but it suddenly dawned on her that we'd be moving home and all those sorts of things. But actually, if she doesn't mind me saying, Grace was the one who put us all straight, because she said, oh, come on, Dad, you haven't come this far to start worrying about whether you're going to do it or not. Of course you're going to do it. And then the next morning was the actual interviews, which were upstairs. the room's much nicer now than it was then.
Yeah, it was dire.
And then I got a call from Bishop Ian to say, you've been, would you take the job?
And we're so glad you did. We're so glad you did. Are you happy with the way things are going?
Yes, I'm very happy. I can't believe it's been nearly 2 years. It'll be 2 years next month. It feels like we've done a lot, with a lot more to do.
It's such a diverse job description, isn't it? It's a huge, the variety of things you have to do.
It is, but I look back on all of this and I think I now know why I did drama. Actually, no, in all seriousness, I didn't go into teaching. I never got O-level maths. That's why I didn't go into teaching. I couldn't do a PGCE. So I now know why I did drama, and all the music that I did. Obviously, we're using that here. And actually, 25 years in management, and as a practice manager, it's like being a vicar. You could be helping to clean the toilets, and then in some high-powered meeting, and everything in between.
Oh, well, we're just so delighted with the way that things have gone, and may they continue so as they are. Can we finish with I understand you're doing a concert in November, so perhaps we can just finish with a little soupçon of that.
Yeah. So over quite a few years.
That's your brother, isn't it?
That's my brother. That's actually before we moved in. He'd not been to Horsley Park, and I wanted to show him around, so we had a wander about. So saying over the years, I've really enjoyed singing and playing the guitar, and we're putting a concert of. We're calling it sort of praise and song, songs with meaning. And I've got some friends coming back to join me, including Will Dutton, and and that's on the 18th of November, which is a Saturday. And this is just a little flavour of the kind of thing that we'll be doing. This is...
Isn't available
right now. It might be when I click play. Beg your pardon. There we go. I believe that somewhere in the darkest night a candle glows. I believe for every love that goes astray, someone will come to show the way. I believe upon the slope, the smallest prayer will still be heard. that was, actually it hasn't come with free sound system that great, but that was me singing with Will Dutton.
It's going to be a great concert.
Because Will Dutton is not only fantastic violinist, but when he was a kid, he was in a group called the Choir Boys, who became quite famous at the time, and he's a great singer. So yes, do come along to that, and we're going to be having a mixture of songs and songs for people to join in.
Yeah. Well, all I want to say is thank you so much. It takes a lot of courage to come and sort of tell everybody, such a huge number of you, you know, all about your life and things. I'm just very grateful. I know that, Linda, you were going to just say a big thank you.
Renos, that was wonderful, wonderful account of your life. Utterly amazing, from those humble beginnings in that flat that I just can't imagine living in, to where you are now. Thank you so much for sharing it with us.
You're very welcome, thank you.
I'm sure everybody would like to say thank you. Can we give them as a very small token of appreciation.
Thank you. I'm very humbled that so many of you have come, because we were having a little bit of a debate earlier how many, and I estimated 20. So 2025, and I think we're beyond the 50 new chairs that we've got. So thank you, Linda.
Thank you. And I also say thank you to Kate for doing the interview. Work has gone into that, I know. It takes a long, long time, so thank you very, very much.
You're welcome, thank you all.